And so this invitation, it is to see right through the story, to see right through the limitations of mind, and how it is only the mind that creates a problem. It is only the mind that dabbles through talking to itself about itself, that creates a story, creates a problem. That the truth of the being is that there is only here now. There is only the wide, open, spacious being. It is to know that this is not a relative transformation that we are speaking of. We are not speaking about doing the work to make a better me, to psychologically analyze your mind and try to work through ideas and beliefs and create better ideas and beliefs. We're speaking about the incredible grace of life to catch the heart off guard and absolutely blow it open, right? To shift the whole perspective of seeing, instead of seeing from the me and the mind, to seeing from the perspective of the divine, from seeing from the perspective of wholeness, that we are being invited into the great evolution of consciousness that has a natural impulse within itself to know itself. And when consciousness has an impulse to know itself, it's not trying to make new patterns and new ideas. It is about seeing through the patterns of limitation, and the evolutionary impulse within consciousness is to know its own light, to know its source, to know where it comes from. This is what enlightenment is. It is to open as consciousness to the fullest possibility of knowing the light from where consciousness is borrowed, where it arises from. And so what we are speaking of here is not a process in time. We're not speaking of a relative transformation, the way that the mind imagines that we're improving, getting better, becoming a better me, right? We're speaking about something so profound. And in a way, we are preparing for the possibility that when you are caught off guard and you are given the beaming, shining light of your true nature, that you say yes to it, that you're not guarded, and that you are ready to recognize the grace as it comes in and say yes. Perhaps we could say it's like a near-death experience gets spoken of. And in the sharing of these kind of experiences, beings speak about maybe they had a choice. Now, this is not a choice. This is about a readiness within the consciousness to surrender out of the limitation and say in an instant, yes, and let go into the vast light that is the truth, the true nature of all beings. It is an evolution, a natural evolutionary impulse within consciousness to know itself, to open to the fullness, to know its source, to know its divinity, to know the fullness, the wholeness of itself. And the wholeness of divinity is so far away from the mind's idea of perfection and all of the limited ideas that the mind puts upon itself, trying to be a perfect me, to be a better me, right? It's not about this. It's about the collapse of all of that story, the collapse of all of the ego patterning, And for this collapse to happen, the mind has to completely stop for an instant, a nanosecond. Sometimes it will stop for longer. The longer it stops, the likely the deeper the clear seeing is, and likely the more abiding this recognition will remain. Now, the chances are that the patterning will come back in, but once we have seen so clearly this light, this truth, the knowing shifts that what you are is not the person. You're not the mind, you're not the story, you're not an entity, that you are that source from out of which all appearance manifests. You are the light that by virtue of which all appearance is seen. And this is what the invitation of this moment is for. This is the invitation of satsang. The invitation of satsang is to meet in the truth of the being, to meet in the light. We're not meeting in the mind and ideas and concepts. We're not meeting in the story. We're not meeting in an idea that there's work to do in the way that the mind might conceptualize what gets spoken of here, right? So we really want to illuminate that when we're speaking of life, offering us the opportunity to meet the feelings that arise and dissolve them, collapse those patterns into the unlimited freedom of being. We're not speaking about a relative happening. We're not speaking about the me changing it up and growing and improving and getting better, right? It's not really a process in time in the way the mind imagines. And it's not a relative transformation. It's a transmutation of the great misunderstanding to know the absolute freedom of who you are. The transformation takes place, really, we could say, in the absolute, in the wilds of the landscape of consciousness itself. It is not someone that is having a new experience or someone that is awakening. It is really about what are you awakening out of, right? Consciousness itself is awakening out of the great misunderstanding of being someone, right? So this is where we speak of that life is waiting to catch you off guard, to catch the heart off guard and blow through the protection, surprise you, blindside you, destabilize you, collapse you. That is what life is waiting for. The perfect moment that you might not be prepared and you might not be on the lookout and you're not in a strategy and you're not trying to control things, right? Just when you think that you're safe and you've got your feet on the ground and you're swimming in shallow water, the bottom falls out and life offers you a curved ball. And of course, it has to, because if you see it coming and you're expecting, you're going to be protective. You're going to move in strategies. So life has to catch you off guard with the possibility that the being caught off guard will invoke a depth of surrender and letting go, where the patterns and the strategies of the me completely collapse in a moment of silence. And in the moment of true silence, where the mind waves, let's say, are stopped, clear seeing happens. Clear seeing cannot happen when the mind waves are acting as an obscuration. Mind waves will always pull the attention And it is only when mind waves completely stop, flatline, silence, that clear seeing can happen, right? What really happens is that the pure consciousness sees itself in reflection and remembers, oh, I'm not a person. I'm not limited. Alleluia. I am pure, flowing, free consciousness. I'm not limited by all that story and personhood, right? I'm not limited by the I thoughts attaching to the body mind. It's consciousness itself that wakes up and recognizes itself and remembers the true perspective of consciousness is oneness, is one pure flowing consciousness. And of course, in the evolutionary impulse of consciousness to know its wholeness, its whole divinity, it will be pulled to discover itself prior to being consciousness, right? It will be pulled to discover what is the source of this consciousness and come to a remembering of union with its divine source. So this is what is happening. It's very profound, and it is utter grace. It is utter grace that allows this clear seeing. Now we are in a flow of this evolutionary impulse within consciousness awakening to itself at such an illuminated frequency that the way that this awakening of consciousness to its true nature, it opens these possibilities to really see clearly in a wild, unabandoned instant, right? That it's not like it used to be, let's say. So we don't want to hold on to ideas and myths and concepts about how this process works and how it unfolds, because any moment is the moment that consciousness could, in its impulse to know itself, make the dive off the cliff. And I can tell you what, that it's not waiting for you, who you think you are, to be ready, right? It's not looking back and saying, hey, are you ready? Right? This is the moment. We're going to make the run for it. We're going to jump. Are you ready? Is everything in order? Is this a good day? Is now a good time? It's not going to ask you, because there is no you. There is no person in the way you imagine. That conversation in your head, it doesn't exist except in your own belief in its existence, right? It's like Father Christmas, right? All of your problems, all of the stresses, it's like Father Christmas. They don't really exist unless you believe in them, right? So the mind doesn't like to hear this. The mind doesn't like to hear this because it's so deeply invested in its process of trying to make a better me, trying to do the work. And in that, you can completely miss the great big blaring sign that's saying, over here, surrender over here, let go, be yourself. Everything that's destabilizing and stirring you is grace. Stop hiding in the story of whatever you're making of it. Stop being self-involved with the mind's meanderings and open to the possibility that your heart is attempting to be stolen by God, right? Are you busy thinking about what people might be thinking of you, of what's going to happen, of how things are going to be, imagining the future attached to the past, while perhaps the divine is attempting to blow your heart into the outer orbits of reality, right? This is what we're speaking about when we are so consumed in the story and the me and what the mind is making of all that the mind is bringing forward. We completely miss the glory that is shining here. Now, here's the great wonder of all of this. We can be brought to our knees in surrender by our resistance to what is. We can be brought to our knees in surrender by our resistance to what is. Or we can open into the blazing, shining glory of such ecstatic, rapturous joy that our system is drenched in happiness, in openness, in the glorious light of true nature. And we can find that it is that that catches us off guard and blows the heart into the oblivion of reality, right? Into the oblivion of the infinite divinity of true nature. So we do not have to imagine that it is our stresses that are going to collapse. In truth, it can be the recognition of consciousness, glimpsing your own true nature. Now, most everyone has tasted, glimpsed the true nature. Many are open to a clear recognition of cosmic consciousness and refining into unity. But at the same time, it can feel like this knowing of the cosmic consciousness seems to come and go. And that's okay. When you are resting in the knowing is the knowing, right? The knowing that any being has is the knowing. Whether it seems to be abiding or non-abiding, it's the knowing of the self, knowing itself. And so there is such grace in the glimpse, the taste, the recognition of true nature, and the ability to drop into the remembering, right? So yes, at some point, things could get a lot more free. Of that, you can be sure. And in a way, we are preparing. We're preparing for any possibility that when grace comes in and blows the system, blows the fuses of recognition of, let's say, identification with separation and the me and the story, that in this moment of glimpsing, that just like in the near-death experience, in a way, we don't have a choice, but the yes is so ready. It's like we've prepared the yes. We've prepared the yes in our longing, right? We have a recognition that our longing is carrying us to fulfillment, and that our longing is the divine longing for fullness, for wholeness, for the deepest remembering of itself at the point that you have imagined yourself to be. So as these words come, they are not to create more concepts or more ideas. Everything is intelligently in process, and there is so much beautiful opening. But what we want to be sure of is that we are illuminating where limitation can come in. And the place where limitation can come in is in the belief of the mind that there is work going on here that is in time, that the mind believes that this is some kind of self-improvement project. We're speaking about the spontaneous awakening out of the story of me, the spontaneous awakening out of separation, limitation, and all ideas that you are the mind body. And it matters not how prepared one imagines they are, how much you have heard and read about this. You will never ever find what you have imagined. Never will it be what you have imagined as things open and deepen. So in a way, it is the glimpses, the tastes that are beyond the mind's imaginings that are the ones to be sipped in and noticed, right? In a way you can't help but notice, because it changes everything. When a true glimpse, a true taste comes in, you come back from it different. Even if it's just for a moment that there's a stop, you come back changed forever, right? It's not the me that says, oh yeah, I had an experience. What we would say is that's a foretaste, right? It's not the full taste. You cannot mistake the full taste. You're forever changed because your perspective of seeing shifts completely from seeing as a me, reporting as a me, to being blasted out of the orbit and seeing as the infinite, right? Seeing as the infinite. Yes, the infinite can see the person, the mind, the body, but the absolute unquestionable knowing is you are not that, and you cannot stuff it back in the box. Residual patterns of ego patterning and protection will continue to play, but you are forever changed, and it's unmistakable when the grace truly comes to call. And we really want to bring this forward so that not to create more myths, not to create more engine running of the mind about, well, have I glimpsed it? Have I tasted it? If you're doubting and questioning, I would say no. At the same time, I would say yes, but your doubting is where you're resting, and your doubting is the mind. And so the mind is strong enough to hold its perspective. I would say, yes, the taste is true. Don't try to recapture the taste. Don't write stories about it. Don't keep telling the tales of, oh, in the 70s, right, where I had this experience, man. Forget it. Let it go, right? Don't be one of those that's just recounting an old awakening experience, because this is fresh. It's here now, right? The infinite field of possibility is here now. So when you stop telling the story, right? When you stop telling every story, particularly the story of how hard it is, or the problems and the stresses that are coming up, and how you're trying to manage or cope with them, when you stop telling the story, you can be here now and meet yourself, taste yourself, glimpse yourself, and freshly come to the awake field, right? Every moment you're being given another opportunity to blast right through the protections, to blast right through. But someone is not blasting through. Someone is not having an experience, right? This is choiceless surrender, right? When we are brought through grace to meet ourselves as consciousness meeting itself, we're not choosing. We're not like, yeah, okay, okay, I'm gonna see it. We're like, whoa, right? It's a complete and utter choiceless shift out of everything that you have imagined you are. It's absolutely like an assault upon the me. It's it's like the rug is completely being pulled. And now as these words come, some of you will recognize this. Some of you will recognize, oh yes, this. And some of you will recognize, oh yeah, man, that's the story from 1977. I was at a retreat, right? Forget that and be only in the freshness, only in the freshness. It's great glory if you've had a really deep taste that lasted a week, a moment, right? 5 minutes. It doesn't matter how long the mind stops for. It alters you forever, right? But when this takes itself through to what might get called like this abiding, this shift that happens, you cannot come back from it. You cannot come back from it. Nothing can bring you back, right? So we want to be ready that your longing is leading you to this possibility. You don't come back. But of course, if you're not truly longing, then grace won't likely come for you. Of course, there are moments where grace just flies in and catches you off guard, and everything has changed in a nanosecond. Everything that you imagined that you were has gone, it's gone. Never to return, never to return. And what you can be sure of, you'll be singing Alleluia. You won't be saying, oh no, take me back, right? No. There can be glimpses, that there can be a sense of an edge, right? Of, wow, something has been seen that I can never not see. And yet the mind can come back in again, right? So what we're just speaking of here is how you can glimpse and taste. But if the consciousness is not ready, if it's not ripe, the mind will come right back in. Now, glimpses and tastes can be very little glimpses and tastes, but they feel really big, right? Because what we're speaking of is so profound. Truly, it's so profound. It's not part of your story. It collapses your story. It's not, oh yeah, you know, I was at a retreat or in satsang the other day, I felt this, and you know, this is what happened, and yeah, here I am. I just went and made dinner, and no, we're not speaking of that. We're speaking of something that blows your circuits, right? When consciousness is ready, it's like it burns all the way through the obscurations, and it truly sees itself in the true light of its own purity. So we're speaking of this all the time. We're speaking of this. We're refining the consciousness. And what we speak of is that in consciousness, there's a preparation, a refinement happening in consciousness where it's getting ready. It's getting ready, right? It's opening to itself. It's refining its resonance. And what that looks like on the surface of life is more ease and flow in the life, more of a rootedness in a sense of presence, a sense of being. So there's this sense of being able to open into the being into the taste, right? Now, some will recognize it's always here. It's always here. When it's always here, it's kind of abiding, right? But there's almost like levels, let's say, depths of abidance. Now, we don't want to get hung up on those words that were just spoken about levels, because that's like great stuff for the mind to conceptualize. But there's just, according to the consciousness and what it is ready for, how we could speak of it is the depth and the clarity in which the taste, the opening happens, is very important. Now, every glimpse and just the knowing of the being, the ability that consciousness can even perceive that this is possible is so profound, right? Because let's face it, the greater portion of consciousness right now are doing other things, right? Entertaining themselves in their minds, right? They've got their mind goggles on and they're creating entertainment within the mind of things and objects, right? But the consciousness here has come to the maturity that it's able to perceive that there is something so much more, and has glimpsed and tasted itself and is being pulled into a certain one-pointedness, deeper and deeper into itself. There can still be a sense of the person that's like speaking and saying, oh yeah, I'm going to satsang, and yeah, I had this experience. And so the let's say the obscuration of personhood is still in place, but the opening in consciousness is deepening. It's deepening. The consciousness is completely independent of the person and what the person thinks is happening, right? The person can tell the story of what's happening. And in consciousness, there's something very profound happening. And now, on a certain level, the expression can sometimes happen where personhood is out of the way and the consciousness is expressing its direct experience. And now those are the moments where you feel like, wow, where did that come from? What was that speaking? Why did that hand go up, right? This is what we're speaking of. It's not the moments where the me says, okay, get ready, let's tell of the experience, hand goes up. It's still beautiful and it's still important because we're still refining, but just to notice the difference. We're wanting to illuminate, really illuminate, so that we can not bring more concepts to the mind or more stories of, oh no, I haven't got it, and I'm in my mind and I'm bad for that. We're not really wanting to indulge the mind's great love of shaming and guilting itself and dancing in stories of how it hasn't really got it, because the truth is, beloved mind, is that you're never gonna get it. Never, never, ever. And the sooner that this dawns in, let's say, such a disappointment, such a humongous disappointment, that it can bring you to your knees, the feeling of, oh my God, all this work, my whole life, thinking that I'm so spiritual, thousands of dollars spent on my spiritual journey, and it's worth nothing. Oh my God. Yeah, let it collapse. Everything that you think you are built on, let it shake the foundations of who you think you are, and start to open that every moment that this invitation is being extended is a moment to either feel the sense of gorgeous, happy joy in the openness and simplicity of the true heart, that you drown in happiness, that you drown in the blissful emptiness of recognition, or that at some moment the disappointment will allow grace to come in and bring a happening of life that catches you off guard, so that a surrender happens in the moment, where it's a choiceless surrender, into the true nature, like a letting go that you cannot plan, a letting go that you cannot organize and control. And in a way, the frustration that can come forward in this process is the precursor to a deeper surrender, which is choiceless, because all of the strategies and control mechanisms are being whittled away, humbled away, right? The mind is being humbled. Everything is being humbled away, purified. The strategies of control and understanding, right? Holding on to the edge of the pool, right? Just paddling around in the shallows. Everything is being prepared for the bottom to fall out and to find that you are in deep water, and in an instant of finding that you're in deep water, that your consciousness is ready to say swimming, right? Off, right? That you're just floating. You're floating, right? You don't need the breath of your humanness, because you can swim underwater, right? You don't need the identification with body mind, because you're pure consciousness, you're eternal, timeless being, and you don't need all of the anchors that you think you need. No one is watching you and judging you. You are judging yourself. And this is such an important piece to find some peace with. No one is judging you. No one has an opinion of you. You're creating that. You're creating the idea of characters judging you. It's all your mind creating a landscape born out of the great fear that you're not enough. You'll never, ever be enough in that way. It's only when we meet our wholeness that we discover that we have always been complete and perfect in our wholeness, that we can allow our imperfection to not be a problem, right? The humanness will always be somehow imperfect, but we stop analyzing and focusing upon the mind's ideas of the ways that we're imperfect and flawed and wounded, and we open to a wholeness that includes it all so perfectly that we just lose the stress and judgments and opinions around our humanness. We can't even really say our human imperfection, but just the humanness, the embodiment that's finite, will always have quirks. Let's call the imperfection quirks. And there will always be seeming differences on that level. We're a quirky bunch, right? But we're not imperfect and flawed. And we have to stop trying to improve ourselves. We have to give up the DIY self-improvement plan that I'm going to squirrel away. I'm going to squirrel away and I'm going to suddenly walk into satsang and shine, right? No, right now. Face it all right now. Face it all. Stop denying those parts of yourself. Bring them all forward to satsang. Stop imagining that you're going to just go right in there to the mind and your subconscious. Do all the work. Tidy it all up. Polish it all up. Clean it all up. Make it all sparkly. Organize it. Make it look lovely. And then present it to the world. It ain't like that, right? No. What is it like? It's like seeing, oh, messy, gritty, and beauty and shining, all of it, and seeing it from a perspective that isn't judging it, seeing it from a perspective that's so rooted in the knowing of its true essence nature as emptiness, as blissful emptiness, that it gives no value to content. It gives no value to your story, however juicy it is, however many times you've told it. And it doesn't matter, dare we say, how traumatic it is. It doesn't matter how dark it might seem. It doesn't matter how much you've achieved. It doesn't matter what you own. It doesn't matter what kind of worldly successes that you celebrate in your personality. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have, or masters, or goodness knows how many professional qualifications you have under your belt. It doesn't matter how big your house is, or whether you have 5. It doesn't matter how big or small or fast your car is, whether you have a sunroof or electric windows. It doesn't matter, right? The being is so unconcerned with every single tiny detail about you. Absolutely unconcerned. Interest, zero, nada, no interest in any of the particulars of your revolutionary story of a life. Doesn't matter how much you've suffered, what a martyr you are, how much illness you've endured, what you've overcome, who you've sat with, how many retreats you've been in, how far you've traveled, how many times you've been to India. Doesn't matter. The being is absolutely unconcerned with all of that, and is only concerned with the blissful emptiness, right? Not the content. Absolutely only concerned with the blissful emptiness. And in the emptiness, hey, how glorious, there's wholeness. And this wholeness is such a whole, complete, untainted, undisturbed, never divided, Satchit Anand, that it includes even the human expression on the surface of life. But we might not come to recognize that straight away. It might take a while after the dawning of our own wholeness, that the true inclusivity of all of our quirks and foibles allows the surfacing of everything that we have held in protection to actually be integrated in the direct experience, so that we are utterly unbothered by our imperfection. We're utterly unbothered by the fine details. In fact, we start to find it rather amusing, the character and the character's quirks and foibles and what they talk to themselves about. Wow, what are you going on about now, you crazy thing, right? You start to realize that it has nothing to do with anything. Has nothing to do with anything. If you really start to watch the mind, It doesn't even always have anything to do with the story of your life. It starts, the mind's randomly thinking about other people's lives. It's bringing in borrowed material, pondering that. If you, right, if you really start to open, right, you can start realizing that you're churning through your whole environment. Now, if you start taking that personally, you're going to be really busy and you're going to feel crappy, right? You start taking it personally, right? You just want to be like a washing machine, quick cycle, move it through, spin it out, shake it out, let it go, right? Let the dirty water just run on through, right? Don't hang on to it. Don't take it personally. Don't get involved in what's got nothing to do with your true nature. And even if it feels like you can make it mean something, let that go too. Don't make it mean a thing. It's so stressful to make everything mean something. You know, in truth, we come to a meaningfulness in our life only when we stop giving personal meaning to everything. Because meaningfulness is really open-hearted presence, right? True meaningfulness is open-hearted presence where we're just so tender and open in the face of everything that we can let tears come. We can let a sense even of like, feeling a little bit frustrated right now, whatever wants to come, right? We just let it all come. And definitely, as we are processing out the subconscious, there will be all kinds of feelings that still come. And we just let it come. We don't want to imagine that we're going to arrive somewhere. I don't even want to speak about what that may look like and create a sense of an imagined future. But we could say things really settle out and there can be a sense of, wow, things have really changed. Things are different. The way that life is experienced is different. Stresses change. But every time we have a sense of, wow, it all gets blown apart again. And there's more and more and more. And so it's not about an arrival. And this is really what we want to bring forward, is that it's not about arriving anywhere. It's not about what the mind imagines this is all about, and that you're going to suddenly get it and it's going to look like this, right? So this is why it's so important to catch that idea that the mind has, because the mind says, oh, well, if I just meditate more and if I just keep working with this, at some point, I'm going to be able to come forward and reveal that I've got it and I'm shiny and pure and divine. But that idea is the mind's limited idea of what this is all about. And only when we are able to allow the grittiness of our seeming imperfection and reveal the child of the mind, right? When we can reveal the child of the mind, and sometimes it actually really takes that we courageously share that with companions that we feel safe with, because in the revealing of it, it's like we're sharing, okay, this might seem really stupid, but I think there's a boogeyman in the cupboard, right? And it's like when you all by yourself, you're like, okay, right, the mind's talking to itself. It's saying, you know, there's no boogeyman in the closet. Everything's okay. Let it go. Let it go. Just surrender. Feel the feelings. Feel the feelings. Let it go. Be really open in satsang. Just be really open. Okay, put your hand up. Just be really open. Just let it all spill out. Right? You can't be somewhere that you're not. It's the mind trying to, right? Trying to. And that's why actually the shift that happens where we're ready to reveal the mind, because somewhere within our consciousness we've opened to see the mind, right? We can witness the mind to a degree that we can see beyond the mind trying to say, okay, do the work. Now you've made a fool of yourself. Now look at the things you said in satsang. Look at the things that you brought forward. Now look at what a fool you are. You should have just like gone in, done the work, you could have done that by yourself. But the thing is, no, you actually can't, because the mind by itself is just spinning its wheels. It's in a ditch. It's spinning its wheels and it doesn't get out of the ditch, right? Until the push comes that says, is that actually real? Can you feel the being? Is that really true? Right? So this is what's so important, is that the mind just spins itself in the ditch and it imagines, no, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready for my emergence. I've got more work to do. But it's about just being so present and showing up just as you are. Because in the showing up just as you are, there's this possibility of the light shining and revealing that none of that you're working on in the back room is actually relevant. It's about seeing that all the backroom action is just a distraction and actually is just a protection that's keeping you bound in your story of self-improvement and the mind's idea of being ready, as opposed to just really being as you are. Being as you are is really such a profound part of this glorious awakening. Just being as you are, right? So this is where revealing, and some of you will notice that when the revealing happens, either in satsang or in connection, and the clear seeing, oh, wow, the mind was really spinning and the wheels were really stuck in the mud. And then the clear seeing is that push out of the ditch. And then here you are, just shining here, open. And then let's say the receiving of these sensations in the nervous system can actually start to be in a more spacious wholeness. And the transmutation can actually start to happen, right, of the old material that creates distraction. So what we are speaking of here is so much more than the mind can ever imagine. The limited mind cannot imagine the unlimited. It can only imagine and understand conceptually within its own limitation. So when we're speaking here, we're never speaking to the mind. You can be listening with the mind and you can be conceptualizing with the mind. But satsang is never about that. It's like what's really going on here is that consciousness is brought here into this appearance to be with itself. It's drawn to itself. The evolutionary impulse, the natural impulse within consciousness to know itself, to know its enlightened wholeness, let's say, is calling itself to itself, creating an appearance of this gathering so that it can be with itself and refine its frequency, refine its frequency to a subtler and subtler recognition of itself, so that it can open out of the limitation in divine timing where there is a readiness, right? Now, none of this unfolding is linear. It's not in time, it's not of time, and it's not even in space or of space. It all happens in the infinite field of consciousness that is timeless and infinite, boundless, unlimited. In our human sense of time and space, the closest we can come is to say here, now. Here, now are the closest indicators that we can use to come to the presence that is utterly free of time and space. But the mind cannot be free of time and space. Mind, let's say, goes through its own transformation. And so in a way, when we really open, when consciousness really opens, it's like the mind and the heart get blasted open. The mind transcends itself. The mind itself, the mind consciousness transcends its limitation and discovers its transcendent nature. The mind itself transcends its limitation and discovers its true nature is transcendent, pure consciousness, pure awakeness. And so in a way, the mind gets blown. The mind gets blown. And that's why the mind can never grasp this. But then the sense of the consciousness can still communicate. It's not the mind speaking, it's the consciousness communicating its experience. The knowing of the transcendent, the felt sense is, I'm not the mind, I'm not the body. I'm the spacious, open presence. I'm freedom. I'm everywhere, right? And of course, these words are also just indicating, pointing what cannot actually be expressed. So it's the direct experience, the direct recognition. And that's why, as we taste and glimpse and we gather, we're also inviting an autonomy of being able to recognize this and have a certain confidence in this. Now, as we truly awaken to true nature, we come to a kind of confidence, which is the autonomy of the self, but it's so different in resonance to a confident ego. Now, there's lots of confident egos that can tell the story of their awakening and can use that ego to, weave a whole worldly persona with good marketing and all of that. But it doesn't actually mean anything if the resonance of truth is not present. And that's why we want to be so aware of being able to read truth in our own heart and not be pulled by the worldly ideas that good marketing can achieve. Any good marketing can achieve, can make anyone into anything that their persona wants to create an appearance of, right? So it's so important not to let the mind that gives kudos to certain worldly appearances over the true resonance of truth, right? So this is very, very important. And it doesn't mean that there are not true beings that have a big worldly presence, let's say. It's not that, but it's about being able to discern and really trust the knowing of your heart, what this resonance of truth really feels like to you. Now, in a way, it doesn't matter, because we will be carried, and we will likely recognize having been carried into all sorts of situations, and we get what we need. We get what we need. But the deepest invitation is to come to an autonomy in the depth of your own knowing, where you can rest in the being and not be judging your humanness, your lived experience, that you know in the heart, in the transcendent being, the self, the truth of who you are, and can then receive all of life, can receive all of life. In a way, receiving all of life, in a way, it's like living the divine life, but receiving the meanderings of the mind, facing your own mind, facing all of yourself, because everything that feels to be discordant is the mind. And really, your direct experience of abiding in this truth is going to be swayed by, are you resisting this moment, or are you just the openness of the moment? Are you trying to control this moment, or are you just the wide openness of this moment? Are you putting up a resistance in some way to what is, right? Or are you just the openness? And what it really comes to is, this is the simplicity of living in the being, is the openness that receives. And this is how the refinement happens, that carries us deeper into greater and greater clarity. So we're enlivening the consciousness. We're not speaking to the mind. Never are we speaking to the mind. Even if the mind thinks that we're speaking to the mind, never are we speaking to the mind. We're always extending an invitation to see more clearly, to see more clearly what is really going on here, right? So we invite this coming to the felt sense of being, the felt sense of presence. And in this invitation, it's not the me that's following the pointings, it's the consciousness itself that is following the pointings. And so when the felt sense of the direct experience starts to shift, it's not happening to the me, it's happening in consciousness. So the pointings are for consciousness to open to itself and remember itself, and to directly experience itself and confirm its true nature. And in this, as consciousness recognizes itself and recognizes itself as the witnessing presence, and then recognizes itself as the pure conscious awareness, only aware of itself, it's that consciousness is awake and alive to the knowing of itself, and is awakening out of the sense of limitation and personhood. So there's nothing that the me has to say about this, right? Stop being interested in what the me has to say, particularly about what is unfolding in consciousness, because whatever the me has to say about it is limiting the unlimited. And that's why with any and every interaction, we illuminate where there's limitation and return to the unlimited, right? So it doesn't matter if you come into the interaction, limited or unlimited, what's happening through the interaction is that the consciousness is going to act out what is needed to bring itself to the remembering of the unlimited, so that the leaving of the interaction will be most likely in more of a sense of the unlimited, as deeply as that can be tasted. Now, if you then leave satsang and you allow the mind to start questioning what happened, in a way, it's the mind sabotaging, in a way, almost belittling the profundity of what has unfolded, because it doesn't understand. And now a mind that doesn't understand tends to belittle, right? A mind that understands tends to bring in guilt or shame or judgment. And so again, it's to see the strategies. It doesn't matter how you present yourself. It's that you just stop questioning and second guessing and doubting what is. Stop resisting what is, and stop the mechanics of the mind judging and bringing opinions and some kind of false authority afterwards, right? At any time. It's just to be able to come to the being that doesn't have an opinion or a judgment, and confirm right here now, what does the being have to say about anything? Absolutely nothing, right? The being is so uninterested in everything that the mind thinks is important. And the more that we just come to the being, right? And we stop, you know, when there's communication, what is being waited for is the stop, where the response doesn't keep coming back with another strategy, another story of the me, right? We're always waiting for the stop, but you can keep telling the story as many times as you want to keep telling the story, and the truth will keep inviting the clear seeing to come, and you can come back with another story, another way of seeing it, another way that your mind is seeing it, and truth will invite, by whatever means, the stop, the ego to stop telling the story, stop telling the story, and just be, right? And it might bring that invitation through engaging, through sharing, or it might just bring silence. It will always use whatever means is the appropriate means in the moment to bring about a stop. If the mind is just engaging in, oh, and here's my new story, and here's my new story, and here's my new story, it's more likely just to stop and just not engage until that surrender happens within the system. Because the being, that we know the being, is this possibility to shine the light on the being that wants to keep telling its story. Now, there are moments where the story is a revealing of wisdom, and this is when we are resting in the being and we know it's a story, and we can listen to the story of the subconscious revealing itself, and we can allow the wisdom of that to just surface, not engage with the story, but let the wisdom and the seeing, the clear seeing, the being held in presence can release the feelings into the nervous system. And then the meeting of sensation is what it's all about, right? It's about the meeting of sensation. And once we can hold a presence for the story, really see it's a story, then it's useful, right? But this is not for the mind. This is not about the mind telling its story. It's not about the mind being heard. It's about realizing that all that the mind thinks is important actually doesn't exist. It actually is not there, right? It might be there as stress in the nervous system, like sensation, as resonance in the nervous system, but it's not there in the happenings and the story the way the mind thinks it is. And this is really this invitation that doesn't engage in the story in order to realize what is true, right? To keep the invitation pure, to keep the invitation pure. And it can be that the movement looks just like any other human, moving and speaking and living and eating and sleeping and moving in all the ways that the finite part lives. But when the knowing is of the infinite wholeness, we're moving from the infinite wholeness and not from the finite, right? We know that there's a finite part. The body is finite, right? The body is going to drop. So we know that, but we're moving from a wholeness. And the wholeness is what allows naturally and simply all that is to just be as it is. And it's to check and confirm in your direct experience that without the mind, without the thoughts, what is actually here? Without your thoughts about the situation, without the story, what is actually here? And this is the grace of this unfolding, is that we're coming to the truth of true experience, let's say, the nature of experience, that you can confirm directly what is actually true here now, without thought, without story, without embellishment, without past, without future, without idea, concept, belief. What is actually here? What can you actually express that you know is the truth of this moment? And what would come forward? Listen right now to your own expression. What is actually here? What are you in truth? What is here? What is the truth of your experience right now? It could be that you're aware of the mind, body, the story. You're aware of the moving, changing. It could be that the felt sense of being is just here, just this, just now. The direct experience is just this, the felt sense of being. It might be the aliveness of the flow of life. It doesn't matter, but really notice what directly is And of course, it can also be, oh, I'm in a story. I'm in the story. I'm angry. I'm frustrated because this person did this to me, right? It could be that. That could be. But that would offer the invitation to say, okay, there's a story, there's a thought. If someone did this, or if this happened, if something caused a disturbance, then you're in the mind, you're in projection, you're in blame, you're in the story. And that's your protective mechanism to get away from the moment. But everything that is longed for is here in the moment. In presence, you are free. In presence, you are here now. In presence, you are free of past and future and even present moment. In presence, you're free of personhood. You're free of somebody. You're free of the particulars and the details. And it doesn't matter which ones the mind says, oh, but these ones are really important. You realize in presence that it's all completely irrelevant, because all that's here is presence, is light, is the being, just being. And then hear the glimpse, hear the taste, hear the recognition, and hear the glory. So be the glory, be the light, be the pure consciousness, that the impulse of consciousness is called to evolve into, and open to this vast field of pure free consciousness, where the evolutionary impulse is a field of intelligence that is carrying itself into itself to a greater depth and clarity and preparedness to collapse all of its patternings into utter freedom. Are you ready? Are you ready for utter freedom? I remember where there was a time where it was all the thing for people to have meetings about disaster preparedness. Are you prepared for all the kind of worldly disasters that could happen? Have you got a bomb shelter? Have you got enough rice in your cellar to last you for the rest of your life, right? All of this kind of emergency preparedness. But are you prepared for freedom, right? Are you prepared to let it all go? Are you truly prepared to stop telling your story, to let it all go and be brought to your knees in utter surrender, whether you drown in happiness or misery, in the misery of your own suffering? Are you ready to be brought to your knees and for your personal heart to be taken, stolen by the divine into its infinite, true nature? Only when there's a sense inside that says, yes, yes, is it even a possibility, right? If you're stalling, it's unlikely, right? So let the refinements refine and refine. Meet the feelings that come up when you're stalling, when you say, oh, but what about? Because you don't know how this is going to happen. And it doesn't happen in the ways that you're imagining. Yes, it takes everything, because it takes your story, it takes your personhood, but it doesn't take the characters that play your family. It doesn't take things in the way that you think it's going to take. It takes away the identification and the idea that you're limited and that you're someone. It's that consciousness awakens out of limited personhood, and you're still the consciousness, but consciousness is free. Consciousness then can know its wholeness. And the glory is the taste of wholeness comes very quickly right? Even in this moment, can taste the wholeness, can taste the unfragmented, undivided being. And yet the glory is that wholeness can be experienced so much more finely, subtly. And that's the glory of the intelligence that carries itself, this evolutionary impulse that's the aliveness, the resonance of your nervous system, is this consciousness that's carrying itself deeper into itself. The evolutionary impulse is for enlightenment, right? So curiously, here's the word that we generally don't use coming forward today, right? The evolutionary impulse of consciousness is for enlightenment, and it's to know the light, to know the true light, the source light, from where it arises, right? And of course, there can't be anyone present for that. You're not present because there's no one that gets enlightened. It's an evolutionary process. It's an ongoing event, and it's already happening. Is that consciousness is opening to its own light, and enlightenment is happening in consciousness all the time, flashing, blasting itself, seeing itself, radiating, shining as itself. It's happening right now. But it's to let go into the main event, this glorious divine event, and to be in the flow, in the preparedness, in the saying yes, that when grace calls, and in the instant of the stop, that there's a recognition that says yes. You know, I could say it's not a choice, but there's an instant of seeing. In the direct experience here, there was an instant of seeing and recognizing what was happening. So the sense here is that the more that it's glimpsed, the more that as the opening comes, at some point it can be recognized. Of course, it can come as a complete surprise, and it is a complete surprise. But the glimpses that had happened in direct experience here meant that in the moment there was something that it didn't know what was happening, but that saw itself and said a great big holy yes. It let go. It let go. It was a choiceless surrender. Perhaps it is to say that it was witnessed. It witnessed itself in its choiceless surrender. And the readiness was that in the direct experience here, that it had actually, can see now, had come to the end of the road in a surrender, really into an unbearableness in the sense of its own misery and self-importance and churning story. So in that moment, it didn't surrender into the ecstatic bliss. It surrendered out of its misery, and deeper the surrender is into the ecstatic bliss. But this being spoken isn't to give ideas or markers, but really to bring a kind of realness to this, right? That it's not abstract. It's not abstract. We can't know the ways or the hows. We can't explain it in that way. But as we really open to the intelligence of so much of this unfolding, can see how the consciousness refines itself, tastes itself, glimpses itself, and can be aware of itself, recognizing itself in finer and finer ways. So there's no choice when that blast all the way through comes, but somehow the preparedness can say yes to a moment that the mind might say no to, right? And this is where we've been given so many glimpses that the mind just says no, 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 right? The mind just wants to deny. But at a certain point, consciousness is evolved, mature, and ripe enough that it's ready to collapse into the recognition of its own nature. And of course, once the consciousness collapses deeply into itself, the whole evolution is taking place in consciousness. So everyone is at a slightly different place. It's unfolding differently for each being, because it's not about the experience of the being as an individual or personal. It's the direct experience of the being, which is a point in the infinite field that is opening to itself more deeply and clearly, right? So this is the beauty. This is the beauty that we're speaking of.